If you've ever stood in your kitchen, glass of wine in hand, staring at your roasted veggie dish, wondering why the wine you selected just is not working, you're not alone, but good news is you're in the right place. Pairing wine with vegetarian or vegan foods stumps a lot of wine lovers, even the competent ones. We're told wine goes with food, but most pairing advice is built around steak or cheese or seafood. So where does that leave you if you're eating more plants? Today, I am sitting down with Amy McNutt, vegan chef and the creative powerhouse behind Maiden in Fort Worth, Texas, to talk about how to confidently pair wine with plant-based meals. We're going to dig into why some wines aren't even vegan. Yeah, that's truly a thing. The most common pairing mistakes most of us make, and 3 easy ways to make sure your next glass actually complements what's on your plate. So whether you're fully vegan, plant curious, or you're just tired of playing the Russian roulette of wine and vegetables, this episode is here to help you sip smarter. Welcome to Everyday Sommelier, where we make learning about wine approachable, fun, and something you can actually enjoy. I'm your host, Kristi Mayfield. Think of me as your sommelier next door, here to help you cut through the complexity so you can enjoy every glass with confidence and learn wine your way. I still remember the first time I tried to pair wine with a vegan dinner. I showed up proud with a bold Cabernet Sauvignon, and it completely overpowered the nice, delicate flavors of the vegan meal. It was a hard lesson on how plant-based dishes interact completely differently with wine, and I wasn't alone. I just joined a new club of wine lovers who want to eat healthy, follow a vegan lifestyle. For me, I'm pescatarian, or simply add more plants to their plate. But they feel like pairing wine with vegan food is a total guessing game. In today's episode, I am joined by Amy McNutt, owner, founder, culinary innovator, resident wine taster, and the force behind Maiden in Fort Worth, not to mention some accolades like Best Chef and Critics' Choice. And today, Amy's here to help us explore most common mistakes people make when pairing wine with plant-based meals, what makes vegan wine pairing different, and sharing her own insider secrets from one of the most creative kitchens in Texas. So Amy, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. Cannot wait to have this conversation.
Thank you, Kristi.
Great. So let's just dive right in. So many of our listeners, those of you out there who are trying to eat healthier, adopt more plant-based lifestyles and plant-based meals into their diet, they're kind of surprised when they learn or think that all wine itself is actually vegan. Can you explain, and I know this is a little bit off of the food path, but can you explain why some wines are not actually vegan, and how can our listeners understand this and find the wines that they're looking for that really are?
Yes. So in the clarification process, some ingredients are used like gelatin or some different fats, and those, they add that to the barrels of wine. It latches onto all the impurities. It drags it down to the bottom of the tank, and they're able to find the wine and get out all those impurities. And there are vegan options, like people will use different clays and things like that. So we always try to find the ones that aren't using animal products in the production process. Animal fats and the sometimes isinglass or gelatin don't actually end up in the final wine, but because it's used during the process, we kind of like to steer away from that just to support a completely vegan product.
Interesting. So what is gelatin even made of?
It's one of those things you kind of don't want to know, but it's horse hooves and connective tissues.
I was afraid you were going to say that, and I think I knew that answer, but I was kind of hoping that there might be something different, and I was mistaken. No, that's a great point, though. Going back to, it isn't actually in your wine, but it was used in processing the wines,
yes,
correct?
Yes. And of course, everybody has their comfort levels. You know, if you're practicing a vegan lifestyle, or you're just trying to be more aware of, you know, where your dollars are being spent and the companies that you're supporting with your dollars, everybody has their boundaries that they're willing to cross or not think about. Like, for instance, white sugar a lot of times is processed with charcoal that is from bones, from slaughterhouse kind of waste. And they run it through these charcoal filters, which is what makes it white. So that's another instance of a weird, sneaky little thing but it's technically using animal ingredients in the process of making it. So for people like myself who are super sensitive and like to not contribute to that kind of product, we'll choose to find the sugars that aren't processed with bone char. So it's very similar with wines. It's, even though you're not actually eating it in the final product, the fact that it's used in the process for someone like me is, I'd rather steer away from that because I love animals. And you do what
Yes,
you can.
and if
You're still living in the world, and you have to make decisions that are practical, and that is one practical decision. It's pretty easy these days to find wines that are made with only vegan fining ingredients. So even just 5 years ago, it was a lot harder, but it's gotten a lot easier just in the last few years. And a lot of companies are starting to label their bottles with a vegan label. So that's super helpful.
Yeah, and that was going to be my question, is how do you, as a listener, how do you go find these wines if that aligns more with your sensitivities and where you want to go with both your food and
Yeah,
wine?
so some winemakers make it really easy. They just slap the label on there, and all you have to do is take a look at the bottle, and you're done. And some winemakers will have some wines that are processed with vegan fining agents, and some that aren't, and they'll even clarify that. You can go to their website, or you can look on the bottle, and it'll say this one is, this one isn't. Certain vintages might be based on where they were made or what they had that year. And there's some of the smaller winemakers that don't have it on the label. There's a really helpful website called Barnivore, barnivore.com. And it
Oh,
has a bunch of alcohols and wines and sakes on there. And you can put it in the search. And of course, these days with, ChatGPT and websites like that, you can type in pretty much any bottle. Some of the really, really small producers, there's not going to be information. So then you just kind of, you decide whether you want to take the risk or just find something else that you can confirm is indeed made vegan throughout the entire process. And there's some wines, there was a wine we were getting from New Zealand that even took it a step further, and they were using vegan fertilizers. So from the very beginning to the very end, they only used vegan processes for every step of the way. So that's really cool.
Oh, it's the first I've heard of that. That is really, really cool. And I love that it's actually easier for someone to use things like, online searches to find out that information, because sometimes it's kind of that hidden mystery, and wine labels don't always give us every detail that we
Right.
want to know. So let's shift gears now that we've talked about all of the unique things that could go into winemaking, and let's talk about food and wine pairings. And from a perspective of having been in the restaurant industry for quite a long time, focusing on vegan food, you are creating that experience with your wine list as well as your menu for people who visit. But what are some of the mistakes that you see people making when they're trying to pair wine and food, vegetarian food or vegan food, in their own home? And how would you guide them in making great decisions there?
Well, the biggest thing I've learned is to not overthink it. Is to just kind of experiment and get creative. And especially when it comes to vegan food, people think, oh, it's a whole nother level that you have to think about. But really, it's just as simple as, it's all the same flavors you're dealing with any other, with any dish. Just not overthinking it, and being open to experimenting and trying little sips with different things to see, because sometimes you'll be surprised. You'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this white would go with this chocolate. It just, these really surprising things will happen. One thing I would definitely encourage people to do, I'm kind of a lightweight. I wish I could drink more, but I can't. So I use this thing called a Coravin. It's a little device that fills your bottle up with argon gas. So you can just get a little bit, you could get like a little ounce or even less, a little sip, and sip on a bottle for a really long time. Or, for me, it'll take me a week to finish a bottle of wine, or longer sometimes. And that's a really fun way to experiment. You can be like, oh, have this asparagus or something that's hard to kind of pair. And then if you have a bunch of bottles, you can just have a little splash and sometimes you'll be surprised by what will pair well. But when it comes to pairing specifically for vegan food, it's really not that hard. It's not any harder than pairing with any other type of cuisine. It's just flavors on flavors. As long as you find the complementary flavors. People can feel overwhelmed and it's a little bit daunting to think about wine. And I was
Yeah.
definitely like, I am a total beginner, even though I've been doing this for a while and made lots of pairings. I still feel like I'm learning, and I try to I just taste stuff. I just start tasting. And like I said, I do little sips with different things. And sometimes you'll just be totally blown away by something unexpected.
You have, like you said, a lot of experience experimenting. Can you tell us about maybe one or two more unusual but super successful food and wine pairings that you created either by surprise, say on your menu at Maiden? What made them so exciting? And then, of course, on the flip side, there have probably been a few pairings that might not have been your favorite, a few wine pairings that just didn't work. What are the things that made that one that was so successful sing, and the ones that were not successful failed? What elements for our listeners would you highlight?
Well, one thing that was a little surprising to me, we kind of took a chance on it, was a Riesling from the Mosel that was very, very
Mm-hmm.
petrol-y. And I was kind of worried that
Mm-hmm.
people would be weirded out by that super petrol flavor you get on the nose, like right when you're first going to sip. But that was it paired so well with the dish we put it with that I was like, let's just go for it, because it was so interesting and so good. And that ended up getting a really good response. So I was kind of like, okay, we'll just get a few bottles to start. And if people aren't into it, or if they want to swap it out, we always, let our servers know if somebody's really not into one of the things that comes up with their pairing on our tasting menu, absolutely swap it out. And I don't think we ever had a single person who wanted to swap that out. So that was, I felt proud of our customers for going with something a little unusual. Because I think those very petrol Rieslings are kind of a hard one to pair with food, and it worked really, really well. So that was kind of surprising. Another one, which kind of isn't a huge surprise. Well, we had a California Zinfandel. We ended up pairing it with we have a vegan steak, and we mixed it with a raspberry barbecue sauce, and then we topped it with a hush puppy made with red masa and a chive oil, and it goes so crazy good with this. It was a Zinfandel from Field Recordings, and that's kind of a weird one to pair with food. And it ended up going so well with this raspberry barbecue sauce that we put on the steak. And it just tasted like it's a really jammy Zinfandel. Like it just tastes like raspberry jam with a bunch of other great elements to it. And that was really, I mean, every time I would take a sip of that with that dish, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is my favorite. And we still have that wine on our bottle menu because I just can't stop having it. It's so, so good. So that was a really kind of a surprising one. And it just, it was one of those magical pairings that was just so perfect together.
Well, going to that Zinfandel, when you first said Zinfandel, I'm like, wait a second, where's she going to go with this? Because I would not have automatically picked Zinfandel and vegan food as something that would ever go together. But as you started to talk about, it's a steak, it's a barbecue sauce, and that's where Zinfandel sings when you're talking about a carnivorous meal, is in that arena. So once you finished telling me,
Yeah.
I understood it. But when you said Zinfandel, I'm like, I don't know where you're going with this one, Amy.
Yeah, that one was a really, really good one. And we do a lot of great stuff with vegan proteins, where you really get those really rich, savory flavors that go great with these really grippy reds. And yeah, we can do what any non-vegan restaurant can do with our food, and get those same flavor profiles and still have a world of wine to choose from. Nothing is really excluded just because you're pairing it with plant-based recipes.
So excited because I typically stay away from bigger red wines because I don't know how to create the types of vegan foods that go with them. So I'm learning something as we
And
speak.
Zinfandel is
Yeah.
one of those wines that is just so different based on the region it's coming from, and this one was just this perfect bottle from California that just worked so well. And then, that was from a little further south, maybe if you went a little further north, a Northern California Zinfandel might not have worked so well with that dish, but that varietal in particular, I feel like is just so different based on the exact place it's grown. So that's really fun
Love
to
that.
just that
Love
goes
that.
back to just being open to little sips with all kinds of different stuff, and you might find a favorite that you always come back to, like this Field Recordings Infidel. That one's on my permanent rotation. drink that all the time.
Very cool. Well, what about that pairing that maybe you thought should work, but when you actually put it together, just fell
Yeah,
flat?
sometimes for me, I feel like when that mostly happens, it's usually with a white that is really on the citrus side. I feel like sometimes when you
Okay.
get those really, really citrusy whites, it just kind of gets a little boring. Like especially if you're drinking it with a course, it that first sip might taste delicious, but then as you kind of progress and finish that course, it just kind of gets a little boring, a little repetitive with the citrus
Hmm.
notes. So I feel like whenever I'm trying to find a white, I try to find something that's really dynamic and really interesting. And that's just my personal taste buds that it's a little bit easier when you're doing a pairing for a tasting menu because you're just getting little 2-ounce pours with each course. So if you don't, I would say it's kind of like watching a movie. There might be a 5-minute span of a movie where you get bored, but just hold on. The next one there might be a really exciting action sequence getting ready to come up that you're going to love. It's a little bit more forgiving when you're doing a pairing, but if you were to get a whole bottle of this, one of these whites that are just really, really citrusy, you might not be able to make it through the whole bottle before you start to get bored. So I think finding the things that are just really dynamic and really interesting is going to keep it exciting for a whole meal or a whole course. But yeah, I can't think of I can't think of anything that's just like totally failed.
Really?
Some things just get a little bit boring.
I mean, for me, I cook a lot of in the vegetarian vein because I don't eat meat either. And I think there's just some things that for me are hard to pair, like asparagus, as you talked about, like asparagus, artichokes, even Brussels sprouts, unless they're like doused up with some Asian seasonings and all of that, except for muscat and asparagus. I haven't found my happy place
Right.
with certain things.
If you're trying to find a pairing for something like a veggie, adding things to the dish is also really helpful. Like just a little sprinkling of, pistachios or something that has a little fat to it really helps change up the flavor profile so that it can go a little bit better with, particular white or something. Like we had a dish a couple seasons ago that was a asparagus salad, but it also had mango and dill and parsley and a lot of vegetal kind of flavors and a cream sauce. So it really like made it more layered to complement a wine.
What other helpful tips do we have for our at-home chefs other than go to Maiden and enjoy
Yeah,
your cooking?
let us choose for you. Well, like I said, yeah, getting a Coravin, I think, is really a great tip for being more experimental. Because I would definitely say, just don't be afraid to experiment and taste test because you never know what kind of strange pairings will hit. And the classic tips still do apply to plant-based cuisine. If you're going to cook with a lot of heavy protein that's got a lot of maybe you're adding a lot of vegan butter to it, it's got a lot of cream sauce or something like that, like something really really grippy and really tannic is still going to be the choice in that regard. Yeah, all of the basic wine pairing tips are still going to apply to plant-based cooking and just really not overthinking it too much and not getting I think that's a lot of times what keeps people from trying plant-based cooking is they think it's really hard. It's really, really easy. It's just cooking. It's just ingredients. Yeah, just once you find your staples that you like and you kind of find your way around the grocery store, you find your way around the wine aisle, the things that are vegan, it is really, really easy. So just not being intimidated is definitely a good tip for home cooks. So, and just going in the aisle and grabbing something that you just have no clue about. Just grab a bottle and then Google it. Google it, figure out what the flavor notes are going to be, and then go from there. That's a really fun way to start with the wine, and then pick the food that you think is going to go with it, and then you're having fun at the wine store. I always like to just find the salesperson that looks like they know every bottle, ask for a suggestion, and then just go from there.
I love that. And that thought of going backwards, starting with a wine and creating a dish to match it. Can you just walk through a couple of tips on how you would actually do that, or give an example of a way you did that where the outcome was just unexpectedly amazing?
Yeah, I keep a document called Wines I Like. So every time I have a tasting with a vendor or I find something at the store that I really like, or maybe a varietal I hadn't had before, I'll write it down and I'll be like, oh, I definitely know I want to use this at some point as a pairing or put it on our wine list or just have it at home. So I'll keep that little document and then I go back and I'll be like, okay, what goes good with this? And honestly, just going back to not being intimidated, not being scared, just give it a little Google. See what the winemaker themselves suggests. You know, a lot of times I love it when winemakers have on their website goes great with such and such, and then you can just, you know, they're the experts, they're the ones that created this, and you can kind of just use their guidance to go from there. And then that's, you know, really not overthinking it. That's doing exactly what they're suggesting, and 9 times out of 10 it works really, really well because that was their intention making this wine was, oh, this is going to go great with salad, with fruit and nuts and things like that.
I think we forget sometimes that historically wine was meant to be paired with food. I know in the US we tend to drink glasses of wine without food on a regular basis, but the spirit of wine is about camaraderie. It's about enjoying it with a meal. It's about having a great conversation and a great experience. So thank you for that reminder about the simplicity of food and wine. It's meant to go together, right? Yeah, that's fabulous. So I have learned so much going food first and wine first from you, Amy. And I think some of the key tips that you've shared with the listener, that one, of course, as we started off with, not all wine is actually vegan. So you have to know what you're looking for. And if that is a priority in your journey, at least we now have resources. Can you repeat the name of that search function, that search website again?
Barnivore.
Barnivore. I will put that in the show notes. I think that's a great resource
it's super helpful.
have. Super helpful. And then from a pairing perspective, don't be afraid of getting creative, letting your food and wine dish enhance one another. But if your food doesn't necessarily match well, you can alter the food to actually be more appropriate with the wine, correct?
Exactly.
I'd never really thought about that.
Yeah.
I love that. And you have so many different options in vegan food these days as far as protein alternatives that you can truly experience the entire breadth of wines from start to finish, from light sparkling to big and bold, packed with a punch reds, and still enjoy those same flavors with this new creativity in vegan food. And I love that. That was something I have been, I think, refrained from in my own personal food and wine experience. And now I'm going to go seek out some more meaty dishes, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Don't be scared. Don't be scared of vegan cooking. And I think, come visit Maiden and you can definitely see how creative you can get with plants. I mean, you can really recreate any flavor profile you've ever wanted with plant-based ingredients.
I thought I was being really creative, taking my walnuts and seasoning them with Italian sausage seasoning and putting it into my lasagna.
Ooh.
But I know that's a really nothing compared to what you create. Yeah, well, I don't eat meat. And when my daughter's fiance's family comes over, they're carnivores. And so that's how I cook. And they see me eating it and they look at me and go, okay, there's no meat in this, but it tastes good. Any final thoughts, Amy? Any other tips that you would share with our listeners? Because this has been really educational for me. And I hope for them too.
I would say, just don't be intimidated. It's just grapes. It's just a plant from sun and dirt and a little water to just, I think it's fun to start working your way through all the varietals and just, it's just really, really fun to just start tasting things and see how different everything can be from all over the world. And don't be intimidated. One thing that we do at Maiden is we like to have descriptions on our wine list, because I think a lot of times you go to a restaurant and it's just the name of the winemaker and the vintage and the varietal. And if you're not a wine person, you feel a little dumb. We like to list all the tasting notes and kind of hold your hand a little bit, so that's not so scary, because I think people will kind of overthink it, or they'll be afraid to waste money because they might get something that they don't like, or they think, or the opposite, they think you have to spend a lot of money to get something good, and you can find a lot of really affordable wines that are so delicious. But yeah, I think just getting a teeny tiny little bit of a education about the different varietals with some, just a little bit of research. And you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to spend 5 hours a day tasting wines and, memorizing all of the different names and regions. You can just kind of get a feel for what you like. And then it just starts with little baby steps. Dip your toes in, and then one thing leads to another. And then all of a sudden you have 100 bottles in your collection.
I resemble that one. So finishing out this amazing conversation, what is your favorite food and wine pairing?
Oh my gosh. Chateauneuf de Pape with anything. That was like my first bottle. Everybody has like their thing where they're like, oh, I like wine now. And mine was, I don't know.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my beginning of my life kind of a teetotaler. I wasn't really into alcohol or wine. I guess my taste buds just hadn't caught up with it yet. And then all of a sudden I got a bottle. Someone took us out to dinner and they got a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape, and I was like, oh, I see now. This is so good. And I'll drink it with anything. I know you're not supposed to, but I will drink it with anything or just by itself. It's my favorite. Yeah, that's the red blends. I'm just really loving red blends right now.
Who doesn't love a good red blend, right? I like mine with a little bit of a chill on it as we lead ourselves into the Texas summer, but that's a great pick. Well, Amy, I can't thank you enough. This really has been very educational, and I am now really inspired in my own food and wine journey to get back into some things that I'd kind of put on the back shelf because I didn't feel like they were meeting my dietary palate. Right. And now you've just opened the doors for our listeners again. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me. And this is really fun. I love wine. Love talking about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Me too. And we know you got so much out of Amy's tips and tricks with vegan food and wine pairings today. So please scroll down on your favorite podcast platform and give us a 5-star review. And I would love for you to put in there topics you want me to cover on upcoming episodes. And don't forget to go follow Kristi, Kristi, Everyday Sommelier on Instagram. We always have some exciting news and some new innovations to share with you, and you won't get them unless you are following. Now, in our next episode, because of some family engagements, we are going to remix one of our previous topics. So you're going to get a flip side view of one of the topics already covered on Everyday Sommelier. It will be fun and it will be different. So definitely stay tuned. And until then, pop that cork and learn wine your way.